A disability is something that has a major impact on your life.
Every disability is different.
And it's never the same thing for two people. I am blind in my right eye totally and partially sighted in my left eye.
I was 18 years old. We were traveling way too fast on a gravel road. Broke my neck, my back.
My Asperger's syndrome and my cerebral palsy.
I have anxiety and depression. People would have no idea just talking to me.
Being independent means different things to different people.
I want to live in my own house. I want to pay my own bills.
Live independently and not rely on other people.
When someone is not able to live as independently as they can, it does have a detrimental effect on people's physical and mental well-being.
It's no complicated thing. It's just that people with disabilities want to be included.
Plenty of people get stuck in ruts when they feel like they can't overcome something in their life. That's where LIFTT comes in.
Living independently for today and tomorrow. LIFTT. We help people of all ages and all types of disabilities find the resources or acquire the skills to live as independently as possible.
We serve the southeastern 18 counties here at the Billings office. We have a variety of things that we offer. We can help with grant funding for adaptive equipment.
Maybe a home modification so they're able to access their home. We help people to find that funding.
Helping people apply for Social Security benefits.
Medicaid, Medicare, housing.
They have a peer support group. Peer support, I think, is key.
Sharing life experiences is one of the most powerful things to help people who might be new to disability, who might be struggling with their disability.
Youth transitions is kids that are transitioning out of high school. They need to learn those adulting skills. It might be rent an apartment, learn how to grocery shop, budgeting.
Help someone advocate for themselves in a school or an employment setting. One of our biggest strengths is providing folks with information and referral. If we can't help you, we hope to know who can.
A lot of times we'll have a potential consumer call in and they think that they just have one need, and it turns out that we end up finding 3 or 4 things we can actually do for them.
You can just come in and say, hey, I feel like I have this going on. Can you help me? And we can, which is so cool to me. I love that.
Most of us on staff at LIFTT have identified ourselves as having one or more disabilities. That is helpful in many cases.
It's easier to empathize with someone when you yourself have struggled with a disability.
This is what we specialize in. This is who we are, and this is what we do.
And it costs nothing to go to LIFTT. It's a nonprofit organization and they're there to help.
Somebody that was a consumer that was working with LIFTT was asked to do an art project. He visualized that the balloon helps to lift people up. And then it became the logo, and it's stuck.
There's been success on all kinds of levels.
It's really rewarding to have a consumer go, hey, I was able to do this by myself today.
We want people to live their best life as independent as possible.
Live as everyone else in society and live as a part of society, not apart from society.
Everybody needs help. Sometimes you just need a little more help, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
There's plenty of life to live still, and there's a way you can do it. Keep chipping away at it, little by little by little.
Knowledge is power. Let's share it, for crying out loud.
Send us an email, give us a call. We'll do our best to help.
We can definitely help figure out what your needs are and get started on that. We're one of many steps in the path to independence, and we're happy to be serving people here in the community.
Good day and welcome to Living Well in Montana. Living Well in Montana is a program of living independently for today and tomorrow, or LIFT, LIFTT, as we often style ourselves. LIFT is what is known as a Center for Independent Living, meaning that we are a hub for advocacy, resources, programs, and services for people with disabilities seeking to live as independently as possible in the homes and communities of their choice. LIFT serves 18 counties across southeastern and south central Montana from our offices in Billings and Glendive. For more information, please visit our website at lift.org or give us a call in Billings at 406-259-5181 or in Glendive at 406-948-8500. Today on the show, we will be discussing systems change, which is systems change and systems change advocacy is a core service of every independent living center, LIFT included. And joining me to discuss a project we have underway here across the state of Montana called the Collective Disruption are a couple of colleagues of mine. Shyla Patera is the public policy and peer coordinator at North Central Independent Living based in Great Falls. And Opal Besaw is a peer advocate at Summit Independent Living based in Missoula. Welcome, Shyla and Opal.
Thank you, Jed.
Hi, Jed. Thanks for having us.
Great. So to sort of begin at the beginning, we've all been involved in systems change advocacy at our Centers for Independent Living and on a statewide level. Shyla and I for a number of years. Opal, you're newer to the cause, but you've been involved for a while now. What is this thing that we've put together between the four centers of independent living, LIFT, Summit, Nichols, and Ability Montana, as well as Disability Rights Montana and the Montana chapter of the National Federation of the Blind called the Collective Disruption? What is the Collective Disruption? Let's start there.
Shyla, I'll let you field that one.
I can start. Thanks for having me, everyone. The Collective Disruption grew out of our efforts last session because a lot of us, including the member organizations that Jed talked about, felt like we were working on similar issues with similar needs for all of our communities and centers. And so earlier this fall and spring, we started meeting on Zoom monthly and often bi-weekly now to get ready for sessions and activities upcoming. And the goal of the group is
Shyla,
to
I'm
unify everybody. Go ahead.
Gonna interrupt you there. When you say sessions, you're talking about the general session of the Montana legislature, which happens each odd numbered year, correct?
Yes, and I'm sorry I wasn't very clear on that, audience. Yes, I am talking about our Montana legislative session, but as this group started, we all could feel some federal overtones coming in different issues like Medicaid, Medicare advocacy, living in your own home, and particularly what's been happening on the federal level with 504, and which is one of the bedrocks of disability rights law. And so a lot of us have been meeting to talk about these topics and to help us all figure out ways to work together, because sometimes systems advocacy calls for the entire community to get involved, but it also happens at your local level and you're in your local southeastern Montana communities. And so the four centers and the Disability Rights Montana and the Montana chapter of the National Federation of the Blind started the collective disruption, and it's growing. And we'll be able to talk about some of the efforts with 504 and some of the things that we've been doing to educate not only ourselves but others as statewide self advocacy is growing.
It's great. Opal, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just want to, Shyla, I think you did a excellent job of covering what our jobs are as a collective at the collective disruption. But I just want to add that we've been doing a lot of community outreach and advocacy in addition to the more behind the scenes policy stuff. I and a couple of my colleagues, Shyla unfortunately wasn't able to join us, did a presentation at the Catalyst conference, which is put together by the organization that is formerly for the combination of Forward Montana and Montana Women Vote, and we did a presentation about what accessibility looks like in a legislative or organizational like policy meeting or presentation, and how to make policy organizing accessible to people with disabilities. And then recently Shyla and I collaborated on a couple of community teach-ins related to what's happening with Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973.
Well, that's great, and maybe we'll go there next. What is happening with the Section 504? There's a lawsuit that, again, it's down to 7 states now have done against the
Yes.
federal government, and if you could talk a little bit about that and what the collective disruption has been doing to encourage Montana to discontinue its participation?
I'll start. Yes, there is a lawsuit. Many Montanans with disabilities and others who are allies and families of people with disabilities understand Section 504 as something a Montana student would access when they need services at school or at home or anything. But 504 is an in-depth law signed during the Nixon administration and actually during the Carter administration, but the Rehab Act of 1973 was signed in the Nixon administration. But to sign Section 504, it was a policy priority in 1977, and many know about the sit-ins that occurred in San Francisco and beyond by disability advocates such as Judy Heumann, Ed Roberts, Jim Lebrecht, and many others. And lately, it lately now there's been a lawsuit because a lot of states and attorneys general felt that there was a lot of federal overreach in how disability was defined and the services that people with disabilities should be able to access. So this lawsuit has two parts. One was happening in February 2025, where 18 states followed the lead of Texas and asked to declare Section 504 unconstitutional, which would be very bad for everything, education, community living, and government services, because if an entity receives government services, they are to follow Section 504 and all disability rights laws, um, to benefit all of us with disabilities. Well, that case was kind of settled, but not completely. So 9 states filed a lawsuit, of which Montana is a party, um, thanks to our Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, that said we cannot afford the community living mandate under Olmstead and all people with disabilities. We should be able to place them where things are the cheapest and they don't need to live in our communities, which is so unlike what we know as Montanans and what federal law and federal case law say under the Americans with Disabilities Act and other civil rights laws. And so the case is moving forward. I've heard there will be some brief writing and other things, possibly this summer. But in the meantime, we would like every Montanan with a disability, regardless of political party, that cares about living in their community or living on their own with or without supports, to contact the Attorney General's office any way you can and ask him kindly to drop out, because we as Montanans value independent living and freedom of choice and opportunity, and we know that Montanans um, are a community, and Montanans with disabilities are one of the strongest communities, but without supports and the right to live in the community, policy options and community living options will change. Opal, do you have
Sure.
anything to add?
If I could just add to that a tiny bit, I think it's important to note that the two pieces of the current lawsuit, in which there are 7 states involved, like Jed and Shyla just said, one piece, as Shyla mentioned, um, would do away with the community living mandate, um, precedented by the 1999 Supreme Court case Olmstead v. LC, which gives persons with disabilities the right to live uh, in communities of their choice, uh, with people that they love and care about, when uh as long as doctors and medical professionals deem that this is possible, and the to do away with the community living mandate would put uh many Montanans at risk of unnecessarily being institutionalized and removed from their families and communities and loved ones and places of work. And then the second piece of this of 504 that the Attorney General's office is challenging is they are challenging the rights uh of dis of persons with disabilities to become parents, foster parents, or caregivers for children. And current 504 statute says that disability cannot be unfairly considered in a decision. Cannot Disability cannot be the only reason that a child is removed from their parent, and the lawsuit is also trying to challenge that. And as Shyla said, that we as Montanans, we care about freedom of choice, we care about independence, and we believe that every person should have the right to be supported in their community, and live where they choose. And if they choose to be parents, they should have the right to be supported in that decision, regardless of their abilities or disabilities.
Yes, and again, there's been through our various avenues, through the centers and through Disability Rights Montana and other allies, there have been social media and editorials and talking about just exactly what Opal said, that, this is, if anything, this is not the way we do things in Montana. It's a return to a era that we thought was long gone, and now seems to be rearing its head back. And again, it's a difficult time, to possibly the most difficult time in all the years I've been doing this kind of advocacy, to be doing this kind of advocacy. And now on top of this lawsuit, we have the Department of Justice just in the last few days wrote some kind of legal opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to screw this up, but saying some of the same things the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are saying, which is a very interesting position for them to take, because as the federal government, they're supposed to be defending the law. So it'll be interesting to see what happens again, on top of which there's some funding concerns at the state level, with the funding for Medicaid home and community-based services. They've decided, again, the 2025 legislature said providers of home and community-based services would get a little bump in their provider rate in both 2026 and 2027, and they've decided now to withhold the 2027 rate because of budget concerns, correct?
Yes, they have, the state has decided to withhold that 3% provider rate increase on the fact that they are experiencing a shortfall. And when many of us who are community and education advocates for people with disabilities, when we last spoke with legislators and members that were dealing with the budget, we understood there to be not, there's never infinite money, but for now, things would be on a better track than they had been for quite some time, due to provider rates and community advocacy on various issues. And then in March, late February, early March, there was a memo that was circulated by the governor's office and the governor's budget director saying that they needed to mitigate some things due to a legislative vote or a misreading of the Medicaid caseload in the state of Montana. And for those that may not know, legislators do control our budget, but they only the section B, which is where the budget for DPHHS is found, they only look legislators and policy makers like our governor's staff and DPHHS follow the budget quite frequently, but they only get in session, they only get like two looks at the Medicaid caseload, one in January and one in say March or early April, depending on the session of where things are going. And the way the Montana legislature works, and Jed could chime in also, is that legislators are are serving on budget committees, so they become experts kind of for the other legislators. So when we all wrapped up last session, we thought the provider rates were going to be a really good thing to get us um, a good workforce and a healthy way to look at things for many things. And then federal changes started happening also at the same time with Medicaid, and a lot of us were concerned about the state share, what was having to be paid, plus how services were to be funded. And that's where we find ourselves right now. Even though the legislature is not in session till January 2026, we're looking at a lot of positive things that they can do, but not many of us expected that these things would really truly come to fruition, because Montana has a lot of um, leaders in both parties who really do care about the citizens they serve. And we want to make sure that we have the best community living system in a lot of areas. And many of us were working on updating Montana's homestead plan, which um, is kind of the driver of how we as a state are going. It's like a blueprint as to how the state might move forward um to enhance community living in Montana. And that plan comes out July 6th. And in between, we've had all these debates about how things are going to be funded now and in the future. And it's been a really interesting time to be a part of advocacy. But I do know, with all the tough times and the tough decisions that are made that do impact people, that people with disabilities and their allies and their providers care about, if we all um, speak out and speak up for community living and community services, then there's nothing that can stop us. The
Shyla, um,
Does that make
um,
sense?
yes, it
Sorry.
makes great sense, but we've got about a minute left, so I'm gonna have to
Oh,
cut you
awesome.
off there.
That would be
I
great.
think what you said about everybody getting involved, and for a great place to start getting involved is your local Center for Independent Living, and in the Billings area in southeastern Montana, that's LIFTT, and in the northeast and north central part of Montana, that is Nichols and Great Falls. And in western Montana, there's Summit in the far west, and then in the sort of the southwest, um, just west of LIFTT service area, is Ability, Montana. And so I would encourage everyone watching this to seek out their Center for Independent Living, and we can connect you with all kinds of ways to be involved in this important advocacy. Again, this has been Shyla and Opal. Thank you for joining us. today. This has been Living Well in Montana from Living Independently for Today and Tomorrow. For more about LIFT, you can find us on the web at lift.org. Thank you and good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Good day, everybody.
Bye.